Have you ever had one of those nights where you just can't stop eating? Where you open the fridge for one midnight snack and then suddenly it's 4 a.m. and you have no idea how you got back in bed without waking up your roommate? If you have, you probably felt pretty terrible afterwards. A little bloated, a little gassy, maybe even a little nauseated. But if you were to do that every single night, well, you might end up like this guy. This is Swedish King Adolf Frederick. And this is the ridiculously decadent feast he ate the night before he died. The year was 1771, and the king was celebrating his 63rd birthday. Now, from the time he was 2, when his father died, and his mother, Queen Hedwig, made him king. Adolf Frederick had 2 main responsibilities. 1, not mess up Sweden, and 2, eat really, really good food. And given that his personal chef was a guy named Louis, the ridiculously creative genius behind this dessert display, you kinda had to assume that responsibility, too, would be taken care of. But let's start at the beginning. The day began like any other. King Adolf Frederick woke up in his lavish palace, which, if he was being honest, he'd rather trade for a simpler life. He'd spent most of his reign scheming and plotting with various noble families in order to marry off his daughter and gain powerful allies. It was hard, exhausting work, so naturally he needed some sustenance. Up first was breakfast, which included beer, eggs, caviar, sausage, bacon, smoked fish, cold meats, a fruit tart, a cake, and fresh berries. In all, about 8 pounds of food. Then he went to church. Then it was lunch, which included a bunch of fish, more sausage, a veal roast, strawberries, cherries, biscuits, bread and wine. In all, another 8 pounds of food. In the afternoon, the king took a carriage to the theater, returning home around 9 p.m. And by now you know what that meant. It was dinner time. First up, more cold cuts and smoked fish along with some pickled herring. Then a whole roasted pig. Finally, dessert. This was the centerpiece of the meal and included what the king loved most: macaroni, pie, rice pudding, fruit tarts, cakes, cookies, fresh berries, and above all, massive quantities of ice cream. Now, there are a couple of important things to note here. 1, this was 1771 and not 1971. So they didn't have the benefit of modern conveniences like refrigerators or freezers. 2, the king loved ice cream, and we're talking about a man who weighed 310 pounds. Ice cream, as delicious as it is, doesn't exactly have the best reputation for being, diet food. So that got the king through the night. Then the next morning, he woke up and did it all again. Breakfast, more jellied meats, a meat pie, white bread, and a cheese tart. Lunch, which included a whopping 20 pounds of raw horse meat. And finally, dinner, which included an eel pie, a veal roast, a duck, goose, lamb, pork, and venison pie, peas, carrots, potatoes, biscuits, rye, bread and white bread. Finally, the king had had enough. He bid farewell to his guests and retired to his chambers. But here's where things get weird. See, the king had eaten so much that night before that he couldn't fall asleep. So instead he decided to write a letter to his friend, Baron von Furt. He wrote about his indigestion and how he hoped his upcoming supper would agree with him better, ending with the signature, "Your loving friend, Adolphus." He sealed the letter and sent it off with one of his servants. Then he changed into a nightgown, poured himself a glass of beer, and sat down to wait for sleep to come. Only it never did. You see, after the king had written his letter, he felt a sudden pain in his stomach. At first, it was bearable, but then it grew quickly. Within minutes, he was writhing around his room in agony. Naturally, he called for a servant and told them to get his doctor. But by the time they arrived, it was too late. When the doctor arrived, he found the king kneeling beside his bed, clutching his stomach and gasping for air. Despite his condition, the king managed to tell him, "Good evening," to which the doctor replied, "Oh, God damn you," because at that moment, it became clear to him what had happened. You see, over the years, the king's heavy eating had taken its toll on his body. His digestive system was completely worn out. When he'd had his big meal the night before, his stomach had filled with undigested waste. As he lay in bed trying to sleep, that waste began to build up and ferment. The result was a buildup of toxic gases within his stomach and intestines, a condition known as gastric air, which is commonly caused by eating too much sugar. Now, this isn't a laughing matter. While the gas itself isn't dangerous, the increased pressure within the stomach can rupture the stomach or small intestine, causing death. And while this is usually caused by something like a stomach ulcer, in this case, it was simply caused by eating too much ice cream. The king's room temperature ice cream had become a breeding ground for bacteria, producing methane, carbon dioxide, and hydrogen sulfide. And while the last two are colorless and odorless, methane is very flammable. As the king writhed around his room in agony, he accidentally ignited the gas cloud surrounding him with a lit candle, causing his entire room to explode. It wasn't much of a bang, more of a quiet pop, really, which was lucky because the king's wife and children shared a wall with his bedroom, but it was enough to kill him. His body was thrown across the room, landing directly on top of his dessert plate. Some accounts say he survived the explosion, but died shortly thereafter from internal injuries. Others say the explosion killed him instantly. But either way, the king was dead, and his final meal consisted of 8 pounds of solid food and an unknown quantity of ice cream. The servants, naturally, were horrified and rushed into the room. But upon seeing the king's remains, they panicked. They didn't know what to do, so they simply locked the door and left him there overnight. It wasn't until the following morning that Queen Lovisa arrived to find the king dead, his face contorted in a silent scream, surrounded by the remnants of his final feast. She was understandably upset and demanded to know why the servants at Yuan told her that her husband had been in pain. They explained what had happened, and she realized it wasn't their fault. She had seen the king eat like this for decades, and knew better than anyone else that this was his own fault. Still, she ordered that the servants be punished, presumably for leaving the king to die alone in his room. As for the king, his body was embalmed and placed in a coffin. Then it was transported to the royal chapel where it lay in state, to prevent people from making fun of the king's unfortunate cause of death. The royal council ordered that the lid of the coffin be removed, allowing mourners to pay respects, but also ensuring that everyone could see the king's dead face. Adolf Frederick was buried next to his late wife, and the spot was marked with a simple inscription: "Here lies King Adolf Frederick, who fell asleep in the Lord on March 1771. Nothing about the absurd way he died. No one knows exactly how much ice cream the king ate that night, but it's estimated that he consumed somewhere between 1 and 2 gallons. That's somewhere between 3.8 and 7.6 liters of pure sugar. What killed him was likely a combination of eating too much sugar, eating too much in general, and, well, farting while holding a lit candle. So, watch out for that. So, thanks for watching. If you liked this video, check out my others for more stories of horrible deaths. And if you want to support the channel, consider becoming a member.